starting. Halacha Vav. On base. Mishpar mitzvahs chobo. Somebody paid up part of his debt. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda probably. Rabbi Yehuda says you should switch the shtar. In other words, you should rewrite a new shtar based on the smaller amount which is now left to be paid. Rabbi Yossi and says you write a receipt. You don't actually rewrite the shtar. And why? The Gemara is going to discuss. Rabbi Yehuda said not fair. The loives then are going to have to watch. The borrower is going to have to watch that his receipt doesn't get eaten up by mice. So therefore, you're putting him at a disadvantage because he's going to have to keep the shovar. Better to rewrite the document and put the burden on the malvin. So says the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi says that's good. He should have to be on his guard to watch his receipt from the mice. We should not diminish the capacity of the individual who is the malvin. In other words, the malvin should bear should have the upper hand, and therefore we don't rewrite the document. We leave the document intact, and it's the loive who has to watch his document. Not it shouldn't be eaten up by mice or lost. Rav said, "Mish osin lo kiyum beis." Rav says the updating of the shtar is done by the corner of Yehuda is done by Basin. Basin has to be involved in doing it, and it can't be done without Basin. Which means we do not need to make a kiyum basin. In other words, Adam can rewrite the document based on the new sum which is owed, even without the basin being involved. You don't have to involve basin. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, "Ilu shama Rab, were Rab to have heard should be masnisa or maybe masnai means to say he's masnisa." Had heard Rabbi Chia's Bryce, of course Rabbi Chia is the author of the Bryces. Had Rab known, Rabbi Chia said, "Love and meimar adamilsa." They would not have said need a basin because Rabbi Chia clearly holds it, and in the Bryce which Rabbi Chia cites, it clearly states you don't need a basin in order to rewrite the document. It says more not necessarily. I'm going to learn this next line that Yerushalmi does. As a matter of fact, the Shaitar Zitzro, I think, takes out the whole next line. But I learned Yerushalmi, which is a very cute shot, which will come back later on as well. Could go to Marin K. You know why Rav holds you need basin to rewrite the document once it's been partially paid? Because it's a case for such as where they say the following: Ani pleni pleni, I so and so son of so and so, love mincha pleni, I borrow money from you, uploni orev, and so is the guarantor. Now that's a critical point. In other words, how does the guarantor guarantee a loan? Because he accepts upon himself, as we'll see later this evening, at the time the loan is contracted, he accepts himself to a public obligation because he has the pleasure, the satisfaction of knowing that people are lending based on his credibility. That's what makes him a shubot. But that's only an orev at the time that the loan is contracted. An orev subsequent to the loan being contracted might not even be subject to a lien at all, because the loan was made without his involvement. So where's there this feeling of significance on his part to make him a shubot? So in order to make him a shubot when a loan is rewritten, in order they should be able to get out of it, we need basin involved to certify that there was an orev there, the orev was part of the initial transaction, and then now he becomes recommitted to being an orev on the lesser sum based on basin's involvement therein. Okay, so that's how Rab would explain why basin needs to be involved. Not so much for the transaction between the two of them, for that aim sufficient, but in order to make sure that an orev is still involved. Well, in essence, really is a kind of hefker, basin hefker to a certain extent. But the basin really commits the orev, despite the fact they only commit himself to a certain obligation for a certain thing. They recommit him now for the smaller obligation. The initial transaction that would count. I mean, that's how some people learn the Yorev, that it's not the Ano is worth money, and that's why it works, right? That's the binder, right? So here, but in the midstream, when you rewrite a document because part of the loan is defrayed, then you need a base involved. Again, the shiur Sameach Pshat, this line tomorrow. Rabba Martzorch Laskis Man Rishon B'Shei. Now, along those, this will actually flow for quite nicely. Rav says you have to mention the date of the original loan in the second document which you're rewriting. According to Rabbi Yehuda. Shmuel said you do not need to do so. He also you don't have to write the time of the initial loan in the second document. Rabbi Yochanan asked the question. He asked now Lamaisa. That also is based can be understood very well based on the Sameach. If you want to get the Orev involved, right? You want to make sure the Orev is involved, then you have to mention the first date, because what made the Orev involved in this transaction? In fact, that the initial loan was made on his say-so. So therefore, Rav, consistent with his approach at all, you have to mention the historical fact of the first loan, the first date of the loan. You can't just go on the date of this diminished loan, which is now taking place in front of you. Rabbi Chia says you don't have to mention it. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan asks a question. If like Rav says, you have to mention the date of the first transaction in the second document, right, in the rewritten smaller document. On this Rabbi Yossi would have said it's better to leave the first document intact and not to diminish the power of the lender. Rather, tough luck on the law and let him keep his receipt. I don't understand, says Rabbi Yochanan. What's the issue? You rewrite, if you're the new rewritten document, it has the date of the initial loan, so then you know everything. What's the advantage of having the initial old document if all the information in the first document is now in the second document? It's an excellent question. But according to the Shaita Yisrael and your Sameach, the question is answered. The line after the next Mishnah, Halachos Zayin, should actually be up here. And that's an answer. Tani, you learn to look at the end of Halachos Zayin. Lo doime ema shtar gadol ema shtar kota. We want to keep the loive on his defensive. And his fear of a smaller document is not comparable to fear's larger document. Yes, it's true, all the facts in the second document are the same as the first one, but the sum is a smaller sum. The sum in the first document was a larger sum. Part of it was defrayed, and a receipt was written. But the loiva who's going to be eager to pay up the whole thing, so there's no extant document for a larger sum out there against it. So therefore it's a tool which the malva has, at least psychologically, to induce the loiva to pay him back quicker, the fact that he's holding on to a larger document, which if the loiva loses his receipt, might well come to collection. Okay? So yes, Rabbi Yossi, there is an intimidation factor here, even though all the information, which is the initial document, is in the second document, there's still the intimidation factor of having a larger document outstanding. Okay? Shnei achim, halacha zayin. You have two brothers, echad ani ve'echad asher, one rich and one poor. One poor and one rich. Their father left them a bathhouse with Beis Abad and Ralbris. Also, if they made it to rent out to others, said they divided the rental 50-50. So as if they use it for their own purposes. So it's tough luck on the poor person. The rich guy says to the poor person, take slaves for your chutzpah. So it's, yes, my slaves are washing in the bathhouse. You get slaves. Oh, you can't get slaves. Sorry about that. But Lamaisa, well, his time is, whatever I do, you can do. The fact that you don't wear it, don't do it, your problem, not mine. Similarly, take olives. Oh, you can't get olives. Sorry for you. Okay? Shnaim Shubir. There's two people in the city. Very famous case. Shem Echad Yosef ben Shimon, Shem Echad Yosef ben Shimon. Each one has the same name, Yosef ben Shimon. Needless to say, they can't produce a document against each other, because which Yosef ben Shimon is producing a document against which Yosef ben Shimon. It says Yosef ben Shimon, the lender, against Yosef ben Shimon, the borrower. The documents may well be bogus, right? Nor can another individual produce a shtar chov against one of them, because he can always say, it's the other Yosef ben Shimon. If one individual, a creditor in the city, finds among his documents a note that Shtarash or Yosef ben Shimon Parua, that the documents of Yosef ben Shimon have been already collected on, so then Shteim Pruim, he can't collect against either Yosef ben Shimon, because we don't know which one he collected on, which one he did not, and therefore he can't collect against either one. So Kate said, Yasu, what do you do if you have two people the same name in the city? So you write the grandfather's names, Yosef ben Shimon ben Reuven, and Yosef ben Shimon Levi, right? Imayum b'shulashim. What if their grandfathers also have the same names? So then yichtavu siman. They should write this one's short, this one's tall, this one's fat, this one's slim. Write a sign to identify them. Imayu b'simonim. If they're equivalent in their stature and the way they look, their features, yichtavu koyin, and write lineage. So it's find some way to differentiate between the two of them. No, somebody says to son Shtar ben Shtosa Parua. It says one of the documents I'm holding in my trove of documents has already been paid back by the borrower. We don't know which document was the one which was paid back, and then the guy died. All of them are considered to be nisofix. If you don't know which one was actually paid up, they're all considered to be paid up, except if some person found to have two outstanding loans against a person who's dying and the person who's just now dead. Two outstanding loans not against him but to him. In other words, he owes two sums. So obviously, only one of the documents is redeemed. It has been paid back, because that's what the dying guy said. He said one of my documents is paid back, not both, not two. So therefore, this guy owes two debts. So we assume Agoda Parua, the large debt was paid back. Ashkotanei Parua, small debt is not paid back. This is a variation of the theme of Motzim Chaber Lo Varaya. Would you clearly demand recourse for the smaller amount, but that small amount you have the right to demand recourse, because again, only one document has been paid back, and therefore only one document against maximum against a specific individual, and therefore Lamaisa he has to pay back the smaller document. Okay, Amabas Chaver Adei Orif. Excuse me. Nice cool breeze. Soon it's going to be too cold, but for right now it's good. Somebody loans his friend via a guarantor. You can't collect from the guarantor, meaning not first. You have to go first after the debtor, only afterwards after the guarantor. If he says on the condition that I can collect from wherever I want, okay, that's what the creditor said. Even then he has allowed to go after the guarantor. Shugam says no. If the borrower's got property, you shouldn't go after the guarantor no matter what. Okay, in other words, you should always go after the lender under those circumstances. Rabbi Owen said, this is basically repeating the mission for the time being, but it's going to go further. It's talking about a case where oh no, he's not repeating the Mishnah. He's going further right away. Sorry. That's only our Mishnah about a case where the borrower has property, but the borrower has no property. You can go after the guarantor first. You don't have to bother trying to wait until the loiva raises property. No, you go after the Arif. And if he says on the condition I can take payment for whatever I want, he collects on the guarantor, even if the borrower's got property. In Bava they said, Every place where Rishon Gamliel appears, we pass him chutz mi'ariv, except for our Mishnah, where it says you should never go after the Ariv first. We pass him, you can't go after the Ariv first, if that was an original stipulation. The Tzaiton, it's a case about how far he can travel Erev Shabbos. For Raya Chorn, a case where a litigant says he has no proof, so he can no further proof, so that he can then say, well, I changed my mind. Anyway, those three cases don't pass Rishon Gamliel. I mean, they said about Mishnah Seinu, that which she passed as Rishon Gamliel, it's only in our Mishnah, meaning not in Brises. Rabbi Yami Bar Korcha b'Shem Rav said v'lo merumu b'chol makolak Rishon Gamliel. Why do they say Rishon Gamliel? Shalochos ketzuvos haya oimer mipi beisino. He said cut, meaning specific and carefully consider halachos in the name of his basin. Basically, his basin was enacting the takanos, right? So therefore, whatever he said had the authority and capacity of his basin behind it. Gamliel was, of course, the nasi. Kayetibo, similarly, well, Rishon Gamliel, excuse me, was nasi. Kayetibo, similarly, Rishon Gamliel said, Ava gave l'isha b'ksuvasa. If a man guaranteed a woman's ksuva, now also a woman guaranteed, I'm just using a man as an example. A man guaranteed a woman's ksuva, v'yabal magarsho, and her husband was divorcing her. So we're afraid they'll go after the guarantor and they'll get remarried and split the spoils, right? Right? So we're afraid of that. So yadir hanoya. So the husband has to swear that he's never going to take back this wife. He's forbidden to write any benefit for eternity. Because maybe otherwise they'll make a scheme against the properties of the guarantor. And he'll take back his wife, having collected the ksuba. Says one now, the case in the Gemara is a little bit difficult to understand. As a matter of fact, the Gemara subsequently for the next halacha, which is not very long, is hard to understand. So we will touch this up my way. Okay? Says the Gemara, Chamui debarte de Rabbi Chagai. Now this is a little bit complicated, just in terms of getting the name straight. Rabbi Chagai had a daughter. She was I don't know, she spent a lot of money. What's the word for that? She was, isn't spendthrift the opposite? Yeah, she was,
no, spendthrift is right.
Spendthrift is right? Okay, so she was spendthrift. Okay? Now, so her husband, of course, wanted to divorce her. When a wife who spends a lot of money, just get rid of her, right? Now, who was the guarantor of the ksuba? The guarantor of the ksuba was her father-in-law, meaning her husband's father, right? So, the father-in-law was the guarantor of the daughter-in-law's ksuba. And she was wasting the property, and the son wanted to divorce her. The story came from fine, divorce her, but you have to swear that you're never going to take her back, because otherwise we're afraid you're going to take her back and split your father's money, right? Says no, this case you don't have to take the note. And the Mechamayim explains very logically, because kids don't make knunyas on their parents. In the old days, people didn't scheme against their parents to defraud their parents and get their parents' money. Okay? This nishtana ateva. Anyway, so says Amin Chebraikum Rabbi Yossi. Turning the page, of course, the Chevra said in front of Rabbi Yossi, why is this? Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. So I think there's something wrong with the gears here, so I'm just going to improvise a little bit. Ma'ilu diyachzir v'yazvina. In a case where, in a normal case, not this case over here, what are we afraid of? We're afraid that he's going to take back his wife and split the proceeds, right? So here too, remember, what's this woman? She's a spendthrift, right? So let's be afraid that the creditors made a deal with her, that she'll take the suit, that she'll compel a divorce and get the money from the Orev and pay back the creditors. In other words, let's not be concerned about the husband, but let's be concerned that she made a deal with the creditors to compel a divorce, right? So here too, Leis Maria Choiva Asivatarif, aren't the creditors going to come and collect? So Amar Rabbi Yossi retorted, the lo yachzir. Just like over in a regular case, so what do we say? We say the husband's got to take an oath, right? That he's not going to ever take her back, and that way he obviously is not going to defraud the guarantor. Here, you know what we do? We say v'yavdinu metaltlin. Here, the guarantor should pay her with metaltlin. Why metaltlin? Because metaltlin can easily be squirreled away from the creditors. So then we'll see what she does. If she pays up the creditors right away, we'll know that, there was some deal going on. But we're going to give her metaltlin, which stuff going to be squirreled away from the creditors, and that way we'll be assured that she wasn't plotting together with them. Okay? That's how I would explain the Gemara. Or another option is para parnun. Para parnun is we'll make her a trust fund. In other words, we're not going to pay her ksuva at once, but we're going to make her a trust fund and pay her over time. It says here, nichseitz on barzo. So Rashi, the Pnei Moshe says, which is a trust fund. And that way there won't be any knunya, because they'll make sure the money's not going direct to creditors, and that it wasn't their counsel and their suggestion to compel a divorce. Right? The creditors won't find what to grab. Nevertheless, the halacha came out in this way, basket, even where a son is divorcing his wife and the guarantor is the father, you still have to take a shiur. Still have to take a shiur that you're never going to take a wife back, because we're afraid that sons do make knunyas on their fathers. Okay? Says halacha yud. Hamavas chavei b'shtar, last Mishnah Bava Basra. Okay? In the Bavli, it takes 177 blot to get here. In the Yerushalmi, 34. Hamavas chaver b'shtar. Somebody who loans his friend money in a document. It's basic halachas of collecting debts. In fact, in the Bavli, the last two blot are concerned with shibuda daraisa, shibuda lav daraisa. One of the classic sugyas in Shas, where the liens are Torah law or rabbinic law. But here, we're not going to get into that. Hamavas chavei b'shtar, somebody who loans his friend money in a document, he collects from, the creditor collects money from the chassid from property even which has been sold off, real estate which was sold off by the debtor after the date of the debt. I dated him if the loan took place for the witnesses but with no document, he can only collect from free and clear property. If I produced upon an individual his own handwriting, an IOU that he's liable to me, you collect only from free and clear property, not from chasim mishubadim. Collect from chasim mishubadim, property which has been sold by the debtor, requires a document signed and sealed by witnesses. Okay? If a creditor signed on as creditor after the document of the loan was sealed, the loan was not made on his cognizance. The loan was made independently. He signed on as guarantor afterwards. So in that case, you collect from the Orev, but only from property that the Orev had free and clear, not property that the Orev sold to somebody else. Amar Levi, Maisabel, the show story episode of the case came from Rabbi Shmuel. Varmi said, in the same way, you collect from property which is free and clear, which the Orev possesses, even though the Orev was not the relied upon source when they contracted the debts. Amar Ben Nanas said, no! If the Orev was not there from the Kitko, and a Kohen don't collect from the Orev, Lom Lechasim Mishubadim, not from property which he sold, and not even the Chasim Necharim property which is still in his possession. Why? Amar Lo Ben Nanas gave a motion for this. Lama? Why is, actually, Rabbi Shmuel asked him, why is that? Amar Lo Ben Nanas said, you know why? If I see somebody throttling Mr. Zuger in the marketplace, let's say, and then I come and I say, stop throttling him, I'll pay you whatever you want. And then they stop throttling him. Do I have to pay? No, I was just trying to save his life, right? So therefore I don't have to actually pay anything, right? It's just, I was just babbling away to get them to go away, right? So too, that's the same case here. He said, Anachli. Anach, but you don't say, leave alone, I'll pay whatever you want. Potter, it's exempt. Shlom Nuso, here too, it's the same thing, Shlom Nuso Haveu. The Oref had Rachmanas on the debtor. He tried to diminish his liability, give him some respite, but he didn't actually mean to accept upon himself the lien. That we do not do. Veiz Oref Shuchayev Lo, when is an Oref liable? Amar Lo Yaveh, if the guy says, if the Oref says at the time of the loan, so he says to the creditor, loan him money, Vanino Yitzchon, I'll pay you. Chayav, that case an Oref becomes obligated. Shekain Amanusa Levo, in that case the loan was made on the basis of the credibility of the Oref, right? Amar Rabbi Shmuel said, bananas is such a Talmud Chochem. He came with such a gewaltige Svoche to explain why after the loan has been contracted is not obligated to pay. Are you cold? No. Is that the problem? Okay. So Bananas is such a wonderful person. So somebody who wants to become smart, should involve himself in monetary law. There's no greater subject than them. Shehein Kimayan like a gushing fountain. Anybody wants to involve monetary law, Shimon Bananas, you should become apprenticed, meaning you should be learn by Shimon Bananas, who has this gewaltige koyach hasvora. It's a wonderful, wonderful capacity for teaching these things. Okay, says Gemara. Ravuna says, now, once again, all of them unfortunately here do not leave me satisfied. The reason for this is they all changed the Gersa and our Gemara based on the Gersa and the Gemara in Shvius, which is different than here. Now, to a certain extent, you have to take into account the Gemara in Shvius here, but I think they're making a mistake in taking the Gemara in Shvius as being primary, this one being wrong as a result. So I actually do not change the Gersa at all, and still manage to more or less muddle through, and I think muddle through more correctly than they do. Okay, Ravuna Amar Hakdama Psula. Ravuna says if you have a loan, which is the document is written, is predated. So of course you would think it's possible altogether, right? Should be possible altogether? No. Hakdama Psula better start kosher. The document is kosher from its present date. It's not kosher from the earlier date. Obviously, no loan was contracted at that time. It can't create an earlier shiva, but it's kosher from the present date. Okay? From here on in, it's kosher. Says Mara, how can you say this? But then we learn principle on mukdam kosher. The day when the loan actually occurred. No, the day when the loan actually occurred. Okay? As opposed to the pre-date, which could have been a month, 2 months, a year earlier, it's kosher from the date the loan actually occurred.
It says that in the start of the
what?
It says in the start of the loan is actually occurring on such and such a date.
You're saying asking a good question. Okay, we'll have to come back to that later on. The more we'll come back there. Okay? Says we don't know right now. But then we learn, it says more, wait a minute. But then we learn, now here's everybody changing gears, but I think they're wrong. Pruzbul ha-muktam kosher va-muchar pasul. We learned that a pruzbul, now, pruzbul, you have to understand basically Mar's question. By pruzbul, what's worse? And by document, when it's predated or document alone, that's worse, because that means that you're trying to create a shibud before it exists, right? But by pruzbul, the opposite is true. And earlier pruzbul is of less value, because pruzbul, what does pruzbul represent? It represents the point in time when you give your documents to the court. Say, I'm no longer the creditor. You based on the creditor, therefore you can collect, because Shemitah doesn't cancel your debts. So actually, pruzbul muktam, it's your disadvantage. The advantage is to have a pruzbul as late as possible, right? So actually, which is more of a lie here? The later pruzbul. In other words, a shtar muktam is worse because it predates the shibud. But a pruzbul mu'uchar is worse because it purports to give over more loans to Beis Din that Shemitah shouldn't cancel them, and it doesn't give over all those loans. But so we're in parallel. The two sugyas shmar's kasha. So just like Rav Huna says by shtar muktam, it's possible from the prior predating, but it's kosher from today. So do we say by pruzbul, it's possible for the later dating, but it's kosher up to today. Yet that's not what it says here. What does it say here? That a prusbal amuchar is what? It's possible altogether. You see the Gemara's question? Why should we post altogether? At least it should work just like a shtar muktam works from today and on. So to a prusbal muchar should work up till today, albeit not subsequent to today. Okay, that's the Gemara's question. Nobody explains like that, and they're all wrong. Says the Gemara, we write the last possible moment. No, but we write it Erev Rosh Hashanah on Shmi before it takes effect, which is the last possible moment. We wait till the last possible moment to write it. You can write any time. You can write now. But now, if you wrote it now, it wouldn't apply to any debts you contract after today.
So writing in Erev Rosh Hashanah coming year
is because of this Gemara.
That's not considered Mukhar?
No, we're writing it the last possible moment. We're not post-dating it. We're writing it on the last possible moment. We're writing Erev Rosh Hashanah, which is the last possible moment. Okay? Says the Gemara. So it's a kasha. How do you reconcile two sugyas? So it says Gemara. Harder the tema, that which you say, the Ravuna, that which Ravuna said by us, that the shtar muktam is kosher is because it goes like Rabbi Lezer. What's Rabbi Lezer's famous shita? Oh, come on. Be prepared to kick yourself. Rabbi Lezer's famous shita is that Eidem Mesira Karti. Right? The Eidem are one of the primary witnesses. Witnesses who saw the giving over of the shtar. They know what date it was given on. That's only critical that's true by loans. Because by loans, Eidem Mesira Karti makes a difference. In other words, they see the loan taking place. The date in the shtar is subordinate to the date in which the witnesses see the loan, the document changing hands. That's what's critical. Okay? By Plusbal, there's no such concept. By Plusbal, the Edom are almost immaterial. Because what is the actual need of what's the actual need of Plusbal? To take a document and physically give it to a court, right? So you don't need witnesses for that. You need to write it up and give it to the court. To post-date it makes the whole document possible. Because there's no concept of Edom Mesira Karte. It's not a shtar raya. It's not a shtar of proof of evidence where they didn't are critical, but it's a tool by which you give over things to court. So therefore, the Eidim Mesira don't do you any good in that case. Okay, that's what it says. The Ravuna also Eliezer. Some say Rabbi Shimon ben Yochim is the one who said it wasn't just the stump of the Gemara. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochim said, "Oh, the Ravuna Rabbi Eliezer." Omar, he said, even though the document has no witnesses, you give it to a woman if it's a get, a man if it's a document of loan, in front of witnesses. Kosher! You collect from property under lien. Witnesses don't sign a get. Only because in order to fix up the world, meaning that if you can't find the witnesses of Eidim Mesira, at least you know that there were Eidim because you have Eidim Chosima. But in Hanami, the primary witnesses are those who witness the giving over the document. So that has to do with, again, that'll reconcile where Shtar Muktam is possible from the predate, but it's kosher in today's day because the Eidim Mesira Kartin, they saw it being delivered today, taking effect today. But by principle, there's no need for Eidus. By principle, it's surely a question of when Basin receives the document. And if Basin receives it today, and it's posted later on, so then that document is rendered meaningless. That document is a lie. You cannot use that. There's no alternate proof, no alternate evidence to say that the document is kosher because the ardent witnesses are meaningless and inconsequential in this case. Okay? Says more further. Where can you, when is it, now, then we're asked, when do these Eidim work? That Eidim Mesira. This actually comes back to your question before. What date is written in the document. If they're contradicting themselves, in other words, they signed the document says that it was January 1st. And then they testify and they say, well, the Mesiras Shtar was on February 1st, right? So they're contradicting themselves. The case of contradiction to each other. If they contradict each other, if they're not there, if Shtar kosher, it's going to say Shtar is kosher. How could Shtar be kosher in those circumstances? If on the other hand they don't contradict each other, right? Because they actually go according to what it says in the document, where the document doesn't say anything, and they just testify Baal Peh what the date was. So of course it's so good. Okay, what's the chiddush? Or Meshlokish also Einem Achsum Mishtar Commissioner Nechli Basin, right? Einem was signing a document, and it's as if their testimony was accepted in court. And of course, if there's no contradiction, it's okay. So where's the case where the shtar can be mukdam, yet it's not a contradiction to that which you're saying that it took place on a later date, and the shtar is still kosher from the later date. My kedun. So what's the case where this is going to work out? Says Gemara, getting back to what we learned earlier this evening. Go give out the gechap. You got to hand to the Gemara for this one. Bina de Amre. It's talking about like the case. The Morin, they say, came. Ani plenty. The Morin came that the witnesses say, this is what Yankel came to us and told us. Yankel came to us on February 1st and said, Ani plenty, but plenty, lavis me plenty, plenty. I mean, lavis me plenty, plenty orif. He came and told us that he borrowed on January 1st. So the document relates that on February 1st, Yankel came and said he borrowed money on January 1st. That's the case of Shtar Mukdam, which is kosher. Why? Because, yes, the Yankel claimed January 1st. Do we accept this claim January 1st? No. The document only is valid from February 1st, but it is valid from February 1st. Thus, they are not contradicting. They're just relating what they were told. And the document contains both dates. Says that itself was a machlokus. Rav Amar tzarech laskir zmano shel rishon b'sheni. You must mention, right, the first date in the document. Now, truth is, this I think also goes back to what we learned previously. Rav doesn't know they really have to mention the first date. Of course, they don't have to mention the first date, right? Because Lamaisa, the shtar only takes effect from February 1st, not from January 1st. Even though they told January 1st, it's not meaningful, right? We don't believe you vis-a-vis January 1st, right? You want to come and tell us that's nice, but we only make document effective from February 1st. But the pshat is for the Orev again. In other words, the Orev, in order for an Orev to become Meshubad, and here it says plenty Orev, he only becomes Meshubad if at the time of the loan he was the one who was the catalyst for the loan. So Rav says, yes, it's true. Theoretically, the document is only good from today on, regardless. But we want the Orev to be Meshubad. And the only way the Orev can be Meshubad is if we attest to the fact that everybody involved agreed that the date of the initial loan was January 1st. The shibud won't begin then, but that's the only way that the Orev can be considered to be part and parcel of the deal. Because only in that way does it become Meshubad, because on his say-so. If you only make him Meshubad for today, so he's no Orev Hayertzil Achrachisum Shtoros. We're going to bed nanos. It's nothing. It won't work. So that's what we have to write from the beginning. No, he doesn't know that you have to mention it. Rav Ushmuel, now Rav Shmuel obviously have a chokas. Rav should be the Mechal Mayan changes it. Rav Krishim ben Lakish. Ushmuel Rabbi Yochanan. Now, we don't know, the problem is we don't know which Rabbi Yochanan, which Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, which Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, and which Rabbi Yochanan. But the Mechal Mayan gives his own shot, but I have a couple of my own shot here. Either one of two pshatim. First of all, Rabbi Yochanan was the one who asked previously on Rav. He said, if you write both dates, why do you have to rewrite the document? Why does Rabbi Yossi hold you don't rewrite the document? And then Rabbi Yossi had answered on behalf of Rabbi Yossi. They rewrite. You don't rewrite the document because a shtar gadol is more of a threat to a law to a credit borrower than a shtar gadol. But there, Rabbi Yochanan questioned Rav. He said, if you write both dates, why do you have to? So why do you have to give Rabbi Yossi to retain the first shtar? So there we see Rav is not like Rabbi Yochanan. Rav is like Shimon Lakish, even though Rish Lakish doesn't appear there. The Gemara is assuming Rish Lakish must argue, be the bar pluk to Rabbi Yochanan, and the one who holds that you do write the first and second day. There's another way of interpreting that. Rabbi Yochanan is going to say presently that we don't paskin like benanos, meaning that an orev achar chisum shtoros is a valid orev, even though he wasn't the one who was callous for the loan. But if he signs on later, he's still a valid orev. So if that's the case, that and Rabbi Yochanan says that again, Mistamar Shlokish argues it doesn't appear. But that means Rav and Rabbi Yochanan are not on the same page. Because Rav is saying you have to write the first date and the second date in order to get the orev involved. Because the orev is only involved if he's there from the get-go. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold that way. Rabbi Yochanan holds an orev can sign on later on and still be required to fulfill the terms of his obligation. So the Gemara goes on. That's Gemara goes on to say, Rabbi Yassim Shem Rabbi Yochanan Amar Ava Bishakil so Rabbi Shmuel's Ben Nanos. Even though Rabbi Shmuel could praise Ben Nanos, Amidroshel Kilsa on his capacity to expound, he praised him. Havleina Ben Nanos. The halacha is now Ben Nanos. And Shir Rabbi Yochanan said, Abchonu Kalok Rabbi. Even if a guy is suffocating you in the marketplace. If the I'm sorry, and I come over and say, I'll pay. I taka do have to pay. That obligation becomes real. I taka do have to pay in that circumstance. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yisrael said that Shmamina, you hear that the flip side of that is Bananas' perspective. If I'm captured my friend in the marketplace, in other words, I kidnapped him. Somebody comes and says, leave him alone. Va'ana yoiv, I'll pay. According to Ben Nanas, minahain gavi, you collect from the kidnapped victim, who we assume owed money to the kidnapper. In the old days, they didn't kidnap for ransom; they kidnapped because the guy owed them money. Uminahain lo gavi, you don't collect from the orev. Okay, so that's a machlokas. In fact, the same machlokas in Pir Taka apply to Chanuk as well. The same Bananas use that as a logic to explain why an orev afterwards doesn't become a shubha, because it's like coming to redeem a suffocating person in the marketplace. That gufa, according to Yerushalmi, is a machlokas. When I tell somebody stop suffocating him, whether I become liable to pay as a result of that or not. Okay? Hajlach Bava Basra. Shavuos. Actually, there are slight differences, but it's almost identical to the sugya beginning of Masechta Shabbos in the Bavli. Shavuos Shtayim Shem Arba. There's Shavuos which are 2, which are 4. Now, 2 which are 4 are that if I to do something and not to do something, and it's 4 because to do and not to do, to have done in the past and not to have done in the past. So it's laharau leitiv, that's language of pasuk, to do or not to do. Laharau and leitiv are not good and bad, but rather to do and not to do. And the pasuk is talking about the future. The shvuah to say, if I take an oath to do something or not to do something and I transgress it, to bring a korban. There's also the past. If I take a shvuah that I did something or didn't do something, that's 2, which are 4, right? Yudiyas atuma shtayim shem arba. Yudiyas atuma, in order to the halachas, in order to be chayav a korban for either eating kodesh when you're tamei or entering the Beis Hamikdash tamei, you first have to have known that you were tamei, forgotten, enter the Beis Hamikdash or eaten kodesh, then remembered afterwards. So you have to have had prior awareness, right? So there, it's also 2, which is 4. There's Yedios and there's Tuma, but you could forget one of 2 things. You could either forget that you're Tameh and enter the Beis Hamikdash or eat Kodesh, or you can know that you're Tameh and forget that this is Kodesh, or forget that this is the Beis Hamikdash. Remember, you thought you were going to the Beis Hamikdash theme park, right? So therefore, so those are 2 possible. There are 2 which are 4 possibilities. You need forget, remembrance. Okay, say what you want to say.
There is one now.
Really?
It's run by a
I didn't really.
It's
Really?
Vilna.
Wow.
Read it down
That's amazing.
Like basic Mikdash, it's supposed to be.
Okay, that is amazing. Okay, what was that theme for? What was it? So there it's 2 which are 4 because we have 2 variables which spread into 4: forgetfulness of the Kodesh Mikdash and forgetfulness of the Kodesh, or forgetfulness of the Tumah. Yitzias or Shabbos, of course, the classic example is Yitzia on Shabbos. Shtayim Shem Arba. There are 2 which are 4, which are really there's Hotzah and Achnosa, initiated by the person who's inside or the person which is outside. So again, 2 times 4, 2 which is 4 is where there are 2 sets of variables and how they interact. The 2 sets of variables are putting something in, taking something out, and for the person who's inside or the person who's outside, right? Maras Negoim by Tzaras. There are 2 in the pasuk which turn out to be 4 because it says in the pasuk Seisen Baheres, and there actually are Tolodos of the Seisen Baheres. Okay, Shtayim Shem Arba L'chi. Now there's a couple of changes in the Gemara Shabbos. It should actually be Mau. What is Shtayim Shem Arba? 2 which are 4. Is it Shtayim? The word Shtayim is missing. Shtayim L'chiyuv and Shtayim take out Shem Arba L'ptur. Does it mean 2 which are liable and 2 which are not liable? Or Arba L'chiyuv v'Arba L'ftur? Or 4 which are liable and 4 which are not. Now this is talking about by Shabbos. Because by Shavuos, obviously we're talking about everything you're liable for, right? You transgress. Well, it's not so simple. I take that back. It's going to come up with not necessarily a way. But our question is by Shabbos. When it says 2 which are 4, does it mean that you have 2 of which are liable and 2 for which are not liable? Which of course, in order to be liable, you have to do Akira and Hanocha, right? So does it mean that the 2 which are liable you do Akira and Hanocha, and 2 which are not liable where you only do Akira and your friend does Hanocha, or vice versa, right? Which is 2 Chiyuv and 2 Potter, or Arba Chiyuv, Arba Ptur. We're talking about 4 Chiyuv and 4 Ptur, right? 4 Chiyuv would be you doing Akira and Hanocha, the guy on the inside Hotzah, you doing Akira and Hanocha, the guy on the inside Achnasa, you doing Akira and Hanocha, the guy on the outside Hotzah, you doing Akira and Hanocha, the guy on the outside Achnasa. Remember, Hotzah is taken to the out, Achnasa brings something in, right? In the case of Shabbos, specifically talking, if you recall correctly, about Ani, the Ani is outside and the Ashir is inside the house, the rich guy and the poor guy. So which one is it? Shmina min adot. Let's turn around for our Mishnah. It says in our Mishnah, Shavuos Shtayim Shein Arba. Shavuos 2 which are 4, and 2 which are 4, we assume in our Mishnah, of course, is all liable. Liable in our case for korban. So everything you're talking about is a chiyuv. And the Gemara expounds upon this. Actually, the order in Shabbos is reversed, and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Bo we're going to have, and the Gemara in Shabbos is probably more correct than here, but I'll read it the way it is here anyway. Rabbi Yossi says this, so Kane, our Mishnah says this. Shavuos Shtayim Shem Arba. Shavuos are 2 which are 4, lo l'chiyuv. They're all obligations, all liability for korban here. The Kavos is so too by Yitzias Shabbos. Shtayim Shem Arba l'chiyuv, they're all liability for korban. Rabbi Ba said, come on, over there, meaning over here, by Masechta Shavuos. Over here, Masechta Shavuos, Kul l'chiyuv, you're not liable. However, over here, meaning over there, Masechta Shabbos, Chiyuv uptur, and this dot is a mistake, Chiyuv uptur asina misnei. No, there in Shabbos, we want to tell you what's chayv and what's potter. Now the truth is, what he's saying is like this. He's saying, even though it says here it's Shabbos Shtayim Shein Arba, and there in Masechta Shabbos it's Shabbos Shtayim Shein Arba, they're 2 different Mishnayos. There, here the Mishnah is only Agavur can tell you about Shabbos. The primary concept of the issue is Shavuos, and we just slip in Shabbos by tag along. So therefore, here we're talking about all chiyuvim. But there, Masechta Shabbos is the primary place we want to tell you halacha. So we're there. The Mishnah is talking to you both about chiyuvim and about pturim. Okay, which we're going to explain momentarily, or at least tomorrow night. Hadam ra'arbel chiyuv arbel ptur. There, it's 4 for a chiyuv and for a ptur. Says, you know what? I know what you're talking about. For a time, we have a Mishnah in Midos. It talks about losses heichal shtaim shein arba. Says by the doors of the heichal there were 2 folding doors. They were French doors, right? So 2 which actually became 4, right? Is meimar chiyuv should be olive tur. Well, is there chiyuv of ptur over there? Every place where it says 2 inches 4, there have to be chiyuv of ptur. It's not all chiyuv of ptur. They're by the plus the seichel. So I do chiyuv of ptur. Don't get hung up on this chiyuv of ptur business. Okay, Lamaisa guys, we'll have to stop here for this evening. I did plan to do another Amud, but you guys all came late, so we'll have to do it tomorrow night.
We're not going to get really into Shavuos until
No. Starts. You're thinking about Yerushalmi. This is Bavli. You're thinking about Bavli. This is Yerushalmi. I have no idea. You're probably right. In the Sefer Shavuos and the Bavli, it gets it only in the second parak, I think. Looks like you're right. Looks like here too is the same thing. Okay.